Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I'm joined by my co-host Shane Stranahan, coming to you live out of our station in Washington, D.C. We are bringing Tara Reade back on. And now, I am bringing her back on because after a conversation with her, she disclosed something that I thought was rather mind-blowing. Tara Reade wrote an article for RT, and it has to do with a conversation, basically, that AOC had, where she was asked the question on Israel and Palestine. AOC gives a word salad answer to this. Now, someone brings up the point that AOC gave a word salad answer to this, and that person who brought it up on Twitter gets a meeting by agents showing up at his house saying, hey, we heard you had something to say about AOC. Were you threatening AOC's life, etc., etc., etc.? Now, as Tara is recounting this, she makes the point that something like this had happened to her. Now, this is where I was like, what do you mean something like this happened to you? Well, basically, Twitter sends her information saying that the FBI or the Department of Justice is subpoenaing your records, and they want us to give you everything. And for us to even tell you that they're doing this, we had to go to court in order to get permission to do this. Now, you must understand how mind-blowing this is. There's basically a case sealed that nobody gives her any information about, and it took Twitter to disclose this. Otherwise, it would still be the secret investigation that's taking place above her head, and we have no idea what this investigation is about. But I tell you this, if it was something that was in her interest, I have a hard time believing that they will be keeping this thing a secret. Joining us to have a conversation on this very worrying, threatening even, set of events. And I'm glad you disclosed this to us. I mean, this is somewhat of a big deal, which is why I appreciate you telling me. Tara Reade, she's a writer, poet, actor, former Senate aide, victim advocate, and activist. She's passionate about animal rescue, environmental issues, stopping horse slaughter, and protecting wild horses. Her early years were spent as a professional actor and model, acting in classical theater production, television, commercials, and film. She appeared in Highway to Heaven, Days of Our Lives, Molly Dodd, and Dancer in La Bamba. In 1991, she worked as an intern for Congressman Liam Panetta. After working in the field manager for California congressional campaign, she began working for then U.S. Senator Joseph Biden. She also worked for State Senator Jack O'Connell. Tara has worked her entire life to protect those with no voice by speaking out to the power and continuing to advocate for survivors by writing about her experience of surviving trauma. In 2019, Tara was one of 7 women who came forward regarding Joe Biden's inappropriate behavior. In 2020, she shared her entire history with Joe Biden. Her first book, Left Out, When the Truth Doesn't Fit In, is out now. Tara Reade, that's a long intro, but it's a good one to give some kind of context to who you are and what's going on right now. So thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it was fun hearing the acting thing as well. But it was Days and Nights of Molly Dodd, not Days of Our Lives. But that's okay.
Days and Nights of Molly Dodd.
Yeah. It was an old.
I'm sorry. That was me. That was my own.
Don't worry. I just don't want to get a call going, hey.
No, I'm sorry. I just misread. And sometimes your mind is reading something and you transpose the word or you put something in. No,
It's very cool. I was a total Shakespeare geek in as a young person and a theater geek in high school. Yeah. That was my world. And then college, and outside, and
you were
I
in
did
La
a lot.
Bamba. That is so wild. Like some of these movies I'm aware of, Days and Nights of Molly Dodd, I'm aware of that one. Highway to Heaven, I remember that one. La Bamba.
La Bamba was awesome. I was a dancer. I was actually just going to be an extra because I wanted to experience a film set, and I got to be an extra on it. And then I auditioned for the dancing and got like a little close up, and it was cool. New York Times thought I lied about it, and I actually had to find the clip, and it got sent to them. It was so funny.
No way. God, that's so horrible. Yeah. But that brings us to this story on some level.
Okay. Yeah.
We were having a conversation yesterday, and you mentioned that there was an investigation that you didn't know anything about, that when you called to ask about, they basically gave you the stiff arm. Now, the way you found out about this in and of itself was weird. Twitter sends you an email and they tell you that we had to go to court in order to even get across and to even disclose this to you, because all things being equal, they wanted to keep it a secret that they were pulling your information. Now, the interesting thing, you did send us the subpoena so we could see it and we can verify the subpoena. It's a real subpoena. And it is asking for basically all of the information that they have at their disposal, either as a CD or basically as a digital information. They black out the agent that supposedly is involved in this, even though they do give you the person who the information is going to be sent to. But the catch with this is you called about this when you found out. Like anybody else who would be shocked by this. What do you mean there's a case that's over my head and it's a secret? And like any other rational person, you called. Now, when you called, what happened? First, who did you call? And when you called that person, what was the feel of that conversation? And what was the information that they disclosed to you in that conversation?
All right. Well, let me start back. So I, as I had mentioned in your last show, I had threats to kill me when I came out in 2019 and I was called a Russian asset. Immediately, I was threatened. Someone called me in the middle of the night and said they were coming to my house and knew my address, that sort of thing. So, and a couple other things happened. My website was hacked, other things. So I went to the FBI and made an official report, and also to local law enforcement where it was appropriate. And in that process, of course, I came in contact with a particular agent who helped me. And I don't want to say his name on the air because that's not appropriate, but he assisted me with filing the report. I met with him in person and his partners. They did not ask me any questions about the Joe Biden situation, but were aware of all the publicity, obviously, because they started, investigating why I was getting death threats. So this went on, and I didn't really hear anything. I kept getting horrible, threats online. People would say things besides threats on my life. It would be things like, I would get a private message saying, "We're going to post your bankruptcy unless you be quiet." And then my bankruptcy would be posted. "We're going to post your divorce papers unless you shut up about Joe Biden." And then it would happen. So I would send all of those messages on to this particular case. So when I first got the subpoena information from the Twitter attorney, I was wondering, okay, is this the case to protect me or not? And so I went to an attorney and said, "Can you help me with this?" An attorney was already working with me. So she called and talked to the Twitter attorney, and the Twitter attorney was absolutely unable to give any further information other than there was a sealed case, a grand jury's been impaneled, I'm part of this case. They wanted all my Twitter and they took it under sealed search warrants. So Twitter was subpoenaed, I think, 6 times before they finally, they kept getting, requests for my information. So it was 6 times. And then they kept going to court to say they wanted to inform me. I asked if Instagram, Gmail, if all my other social media was also part of this. And the Twitter attorney said, "I am so sorry, I can't answer this question. Different companies have different relationships with their subscribers. What I would say is, if we're getting this, it could be, but I can't say that. I don't know."
Wow.
So basically he was saying, so I left the conversation going, okay, so they're getting all my information. But what was strange to me is if it was a case to help me, why were they doing it under sealed kind of cloak and dagger circumstances when I was cooperating with them about, about this other thing? So it's never been clear to me. It's been going on for a few months. All I know is that there's a grand jury impaneled, that there's a that it's a DOJ case with an assistant attorney general working on it, and there's a judge involved. Other than that, I kind of just wait. And I really am upset that there's this intimidation factor happening more and more for people. So that's why I wrote that op-ed about Ryan Wentz. Ryan Wentz was approached by CHP, California Highway Patrol, who doesn't normally even have purview over federal issues. They came to his back fence, yelled his name, started questioning him, accused him of threatening to kill AOC. and you've read the story, and he's been on a couple of shows since describing his thing. And I spoke to him directly. So I wrote this piece because I wanted to say, what is going on? Are we entering a police state? Like why are, I can understand Capitol rioters if they were doing harm, violence, threats. That's different. If they are, going and pursuing legal channels to address that. But why are they going after, people that are not involved with that kind of activity and private citizens? It's in this way. So I was kind of looking at it as a meta issue, if you will.
Absolutely. And that is something, when we were talking about the Capitol riots, the day after it happened, when we went on the air, we condemned what the people who were rioting, breaching the Capitol, what they were doing. But from the first day on, we were also worried that particularly would be seen as a justification for much wider domestic pushback. And, investigating people, investigating activists, pushing back on journalists, that kind of thing, which had been picking up in recent years, but it definitely seems to have accelerated since then. And Ryan Wentz, if folks haven't seen the video, again, this is AOC talking about Israel and Palestine. It is a shining example, as far as I'm concerned, of circumlocution. She's completely talking around the issue. She's sputtering. She's not giving a direct answer to the question because she's kind of being put in a weird spot in that question. But Ryan Wentz boasts about it, not threateningly, just jokingly, as a lot of folks were online. And like you're saying, he gets investigated. Now, I want to come back to your story. We've only got a minute left on this side of the break. When did this happen? When were you first notified by Twitter about what was going on here? What's the brief timeline of events, Tara?
At the same time that the Monterey DA was doing sealed search warrants into my education and threatening felony perjury, it was happening at the same time. So in the summer, late summer, fall, right before the election, and then has gone on. I found out about the Twitter thing in December.
There we go. You know what? We've got to close it out here. We'll be back with Tara in a minute. We are joined by Tara Reade, talking about a sealed investigation that she was only notified of by Twitter, by an attorney for Twitter, telling her that they were getting subpoena requests for all of her information, and they had to fight to let her know that they were getting these requests. We're going to be back with Tara on the other side of the short break. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We'll be back with Tara in just a minute. And there's the break.
Yeah, there's our break. That Andre is getting that much faster with that break.
All right, Jamarl, you have her bio up. I do not see that. Are you down to bring her back?
Oh yeah, I'm down. It's in the headlines. I just have it at the very top of the headline top, but I can bring it back. I don't mind.
Oh, I see it. Okay, cool.
So all right. So I am going to get into how your perceptions of this, because I think your perceptions of this matter, because ultimately this is on you, right? And I don't think it's random. I don't think it's on you because you didn't pay a parking ticket. It seems like it's related in some way to Biden, whether that's the Russian plant stuff, and they're like, okay, this is a justification to do it. Just give us your take on it. So I'm going to bring us back in the intro, and we're going to go another 15. All right, let's start now. Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I'm joined by my co-host Shane Stranahan, coming to you live out of our station in Washington, D.C. Joining us, or continuing to join us, is Tara Reade. She's a writer, poet, actor, former Senate aide, victim advocate, and activist. She is passionate about animal rescue, environmental issues, stopping horse slaughter, and protecting wild horses. Her early years were spent as a professional actor and model, acting in classical theater productions, television, commercials, and film. She appeared in Highway to Heaven, Days and Nights of Molly Dodd, and as a dancer in La Bamba. In 1991, she worked as an intern for Congressman Leon Panetta. After working as a field manager for California congressional campaign, she began working for then U.S. Senator Joseph Biden. She also worked for State Senator Jack O'Connell. Tara has worked her entire life for protecting those with no voice by speaking out to power, and continues to advocate for survivors by writing about her experience surviving trauma. In 2019, Reade was one of 7 women who came forward regarding Joe Biden's inappropriate behavior. In 2020, she shared her entire history with Joe Biden. Her first book, Left Out When the Truth Doesn't Fit In, is out now. And Lord knows that truth did not fit in a Democratic Party that were terrified that anything was going to stop Joe Biden from shuffling into office. And yeah, I think they thought that considering the Clinton emails and everything else, I think they reacted to you as if it was an immune system, like they were killer T cells, and you were something that just didn't compute at all. Um, I mean, honestly, I mean, that's the way they
Yeah.
seem to have act. And so this gets
Yeah.
to this issue, meaning the issue of the case itself that we were talking about in the last segment. How do you
Hmm.
frame this? How do you see this? I mean, do you see this as retribution? Do you see this as threats? Why do you think that this investigation is taking place? Because for my framing of this, if it was something that was to your benefit, they would tell you. Meaning, if
Hmm.
it's somebody who's threatening you, they would say, hey, we were dealing with the case of the person who's threatening you, and this is what we know. Or,
Right.
this is the case of the person who's threatening you, but we can't tell you the secondary information. That's not that. This is you're bothering us by asking us these questions. You're not even supposed to know that this was even taking place to even be talking to me in the first place. That's what this looks like. How do you frame this from your take?
Well, I tell you that I had said, when we had talked earlier, I just said all roads lead to Biden. I mean, this is I came forward about his sexual harassing me when I was a staffer and about the sexual assault. And when I came forward, the pushback was firm and strong at first with the Russian narrative, because we're in that neo-McCarthyism mode right now. And it's all kind of falling in line with us moving towards this Cold War with China and Russia, which is ridiculous. And nobody wants that. But we're going down that road. And so I'm just sort of like political collateral damage. Like they're just kind of sweeping me up in that narrative. Anyone who disagrees with the Democratic elite agenda, you're an outlier. You're must be a Russian asset. I mean, even Tulsi Gabbard, was called that, and just prominent journalists have been called that are like Ryan Grimm, and it's ridiculous. What I will say is that I confronted the FBI officer. I went on the phone. I was like, wait a second. I said, are you investigating me? Tell me right now. And he wouldn't answer the question. FBI has a way of answering a question with a question, if you will. But he wouldn't specify what it was about and said he could not. And I said, does this have to do with Joe Biden? Is Joe Biden using the Department of Justice and the FBI to go after me? And he said, oh, and he answered that. He said, oh, if I saw misconduct, I would report it. So that's the only answer I got from him. So I don't know. I still don't know if it's hanging over my head. And what really gets me is that survivors coming out against powerful people is hard enough, but then to have something hanging over your head like prison, it's unconscionable.
It is. Well, and okay, so I want to come back. A bunch of threats made against you directly. You were on the other side of the break talking about specifically blackmail threats, where people were saying, if you don't stop, we're going to publish private information of yours, your divorce documents, bankruptcy documents, different things. That is blackmail by any definition that I know. That's somebody trying to extract some action out of you by threatening to disclose information of yours. You also had death threats. Before we joined the show, I'm pretty sure you've talked about this publicly. You had your horse. They were threatening your horse, for gosh sakes.
Yes.
Literally grievous bodily harm on your horse, which is about as terrible as it can get, in my opinion. But you add all that stuff together, just a constant harassment campaign. As far as you know, what has been the result of those threats? I mean, I'm guessing, I know that you reported a lot of these. Have any of those people or cases been investigated? What have you learned about the threats made against you specifically?
Nothing. As far as nothing's really been done, in terms of who was doing it, it was K-Hive accounts. It was Sally Albright. It was the Kranzensteins very aggressively. Kranzensteins were the ones that were sending things like, this is going to be printed about you unless you do this, and so I don't know who they're working for, because to me, they don't have a personal vendetta against me. It seems like they're doing a job, like they're being paid by someone, but who is that? I did find out, of course, you knew about and we talked about it last time, about the Really America super PAC for the Democrats, and that they were paying trolls. And one of those trolls went after me, as well as the Cuomo survivors. I don't know if anyone's really looking at social media troll farms and American ones. They were blaming Russia, but these are American trolls and people that are being paid to go after American citizens when they speak up or even talk about a political opinion that differs from the mainstream.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Hillary Clinton had spent millions in regards to sending people to say bad things about other people online. And the idea that you have to pay people for it is pretty sad in and of itself. But it is something that happens. I mean, other governments use, Twitter as a militaristic endeavor in order to shape public opinion, et cetera. Same thing with Jeremy Corbyn. If you remember that agency in the British government, I cannot think of the name to save my life. But basically, they were paid by the British government, turned around and were attacking Corbyn, despite the fact of being paid by the British government, under this guise of fighting Russian disinformation.
You're talking about the Integrity Initiative.
That's it, Integrity Initiative. Because, of course, Jeremy Corbyn was a Russian agent. I mean, for God's sake. But this is like using social media in a way that shapes almost as a psyop of sorts.
It's weaponizing it.
It's weaponizing social media. That's exactly what it's doing. And then dropping the context as if the only people who are doing it are Russia and China. It's a lot of ludicrous.
But it is. I mean, at this point, Vladimir Putin must be surprised and proud at how many Russian agents we have in America.
I know, right? Just
right.
God, King Putin at this point.
I mean, it's ridiculous because last night, if you saw the Katie Halper, she had she had Ryan Wentz on. She had some other people from the, Left Bitches podcast, and they had worked also for Soapbox, and they were all accused of the same thing. So, yeah, it's a narrative that's getting tired, and I think Americans are getting tired of it. I think it's getting old. I think people are like, okay, I don't know if I believe Rachel Maddow anymore, but she's been going on about this for 2 years, and, it's kind of ridiculous.
From your standpoint, though, because we only have about 5 minutes, and I just want to get your take at going out.
Yeah.
How do you feel about this going forward? I mean, are you overly concerned? Do you consider this to be a threat? Have you guys been attacked to try to get more information going forward? Like, what's the play? What's the playbook?
I've been afraid to talk about it publicly until recently, and I just decided, you know what? When I saw Ryan Wentz, when I saw what happened to him, I decided to write the op-ed and talk about it. And I've been very nervous. I mean, like I've even woken up in the middle of the night and going, I wonder if they're coming for me. It's irrational, but it's this feeling like because I came forward about Joe Biden, now I have a target on my back, and I don't like the feeling, and I also reject it. So there's this part of me that really wants to advocate for everyone who has survived trauma and say, no, you don't have to live like that. We are going to change this. We are going to change rape culture in America. We're going to change the way we look at this. And so I've kind of taken a proactive stance. I'm not easily intimidated, and I'm not easily scared. I see a lot of the things that Joe Biden's campaign did with me as tactics. And remember, I worked for Democrats. I already know the playbook. I know what they're doing. So, it's not working on me as well. Emotionally, of course, it has an effect. It causes anxiety and all those feelings. But then when I look at it rationally, I'm telling the truth. I'm standing my truth. I just keep doing that. And I want to make it easier for the person behind me. And I hope Lindsey Boylan had an easier time of it than I did, because I really, kept talking about, like, when she started getting trolled, I posted those trolls on social media and said, these are the same ones that followed me and that did things to me and that harassed me. This has to stop. And I think that's what you do. You shine light on it. You shine light on the bullies and you say, no, we're not going to accept this. And you move forward that way. So
I think in the case of Lindsey Boylan, you're right. I think that because she was one of the people who started it, but because with New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, again, Lindsey Boylan, making allegations that he had sexually harassed her and assaulted her at different points, she was one of a wave of people. This is coming out on the tails of the story that Cuomo had his administration suppress results, where, again, a Democratic aide an aide of his in a private meeting with Democratic lawmakers basically said that they froze. That is the quote, the word, we froze
Yeah.
in response to fears of scrutiny from the DOJ on his administration in New York artificially lowering numbers of COVID patients who had died after being sent back, to hospitals from nursing homes, and then in some cases being sent back to the nursing homes before they'd fully recovered from COVID. So that happened. At the same time, you have this wave coming out of people, whether it's literal manhandling, and physical abuse and assault, or sort of political heavy-handed behavior. I think in his case, he gets a lot less protection because of this wave of scrutiny than Biden still has in the media. And part of that might just be because he's president. Part of it's probably that he's been a major power in the Democratic Party for a long time and kind of sidestepped into the presidency after it not seeming clear that he'd even be running at a certain point during the primaries. Anyway, we've only got a minute or two left here. Thank you again for bringing this all out. I want to go back to your case. Where do you see yourself going here? And I don't just mean, you've recently published a book specifically with this case and specifically with the sort of degree of activism that you're getting into and trying to advocate for other people who are coming out. I've just, again, in a broad sense, what's your orientation right now and where do you see yourself going? Tara?
Well, I want to remain a progressive independent. I'm not part of the Democratic Party by any means anymore, or the Republican Party. What I want to do is help with legislation and statute of limitations for rape cases, for sexual assault cases. I want to be active in getting rid of that slush fund that they used in Congress as taxpayer money to pay off people to be quiet about sexual harassment and sexual assault charges. I'm going to be part of legislation that really makes change in that sense. So I want to be an activist there. I also want to continue to write and continue to use my voice. As far as this other DOJ case that we were talking about earlier, I'm just going on with my life and hopefully, nothing bad will happen. And, I can find out more information through attorneys eventually. In the meantime, I just want to keep doing the work of helping survivors find their voice and speak up. And I will continue to, I'm very anti-imperialist. I am very supportive of people that are for peace. And, yesterday was 2 years since they jailed Julian Assange. And we need to talk about what's happening to the silencing of media in general and what's happening to journalists and how they're being persecuted like Julian Assange has been.
Absolutely. 100% agreed with you on that. We have a lot in common there. Tara, thank you again for joining us. Great conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, for those listening, that was the voice of Tara Reade. She's a writer, poet, actor, former Senate aide, victim advocate, and activist. And she has recently released a book that you can go check out now. Her first book, Left Out When the Truth Doesn't Fit In. Go check that out. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We will be back in a minute on the other side of the short break.
Do. And that's that. Tara,
okay.
Again, thank you again for this. I know that it was short notice, and it was just after, like I said, after hearing the story, I thought people have to know this. It's like that light has to be shined on that.
Yeah.
That can't just run.
Thank you for shining light on it. All right.
Well,
so I'll talk to you soon, I hope.
Absolutely. This is up now, actually. So I'll send you the link for it and send you guys the link for it.
Okay.
But yeah, and so once again, thank you.
Thank you, Tara.
Sure. And then I'll give you Ryan's number and Ryan Wentz if you want to talk to him.
Yes, I do want to talk to him because that's a big deal. Them showing up at his house like that, and even it's invasive, right? I mean, you say something on Twitter, and then all of a sudden somebody shows up at your house from the law, saying we're here for an inquiry.
Yeah, they asked some really invasive questions too. It was really weird.
I mean, asking about his family. Oh yeah, that's yeah. Alrighty.
Shane, it was nice meeting you, and again. And thanks again for both of you. I really appreciate all the work you're doing.
Oh,
thank you.
All right, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tara.
I'm going to end this here all. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. And I'm going to say a shout out once again to Tara and my indomitable co-host, Stranahan. First name, Shane. All right, guys. Y'all have a good one. All right. And Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. This one is a one for the record books tomorrow, I suppose. I want to thank Tara for coming on. I asked her short notice. Like I said, when she told me about the story, I thought, oh my God. Because understand the implications. Basically, Donald Trump is considered the end of the world, basically. And you had Democrats and some Republicans, especially establishment Republicans, hated his guts and wanted him out that office. Problem. Tara Reade comes in and says, I was basically raped by Biden. Now, this is after Kavanaugh. This is after all of these people talk about believe women, and all of those people that wanted them to believe women at that very specific moment stopped believing women because it was inconvenient. It was no longer a Republican that was being accused of rape. It was Biden himself. And it was credible. And it had a lot more moving parts to it, credible moving parts to it, than the Kavanaugh stuff did, despite the fact that the entire axis of the country turned in order to try to stop Kavanaugh, calling a man a rapist and everything but a child of God. In this case, oh, they didn't think that way. In this case, we need to crush her. We need to stop her. So anything was allowed. Threats, attacks, all of that stuff was fair game. And think about it from the political space. If they're willing to use that stuff against other political opponents, why don't you believe that they will be willing to use that stuff against people who are not in politics, but people who are just a pain in their ass? You realize that Hillary Clinton was instrumental in getting the case killed against Harvey Weinstein. I'll leave it. I just thought it was a huge deal. The idea that we're using the instruments of federal government in order to attack people politically. And before you say, oh, there's no way they would do that, Roger Stone, they use the government to go in as if Roger Stone was going to come out guns a-blazing. The goal of this stuff when they're apprehending people is not to make the person look bad. It's not to have these kind of, oh, we're going to have the media there so we can just have cameras in his face when he's coming out and he's being dragged out. And yeah, we're going to have a lot of guns there to make it look as if the person is going to come out guns a-blazing. When the reality of it is, they could have told Roger Stone, we need you to appear in court, and Stone would have most likely appeared in court. It was for theatrics. If they're willing to do that nonsense within, again, levers of government, why wouldn't this nonsense come up? Why wouldn't they create this kind of fig leaf of, oh, we have to do a criminal investigation to ensure she's not working with the Russians as a foreign agent? Do they believe she's doing it? Who the hell knows? Who the hell cares? That's not the point. The point is threat. That's the point. So am I, the fact that they were willing to do something like this is astonishing. And the fact that even more so that this stuff was going to be held in secret, where she wasn't even supposed to know that they were looking into her in an investigation like this, that's even more worrying. So the guy saying, I wouldn't allow them to do that. Yeah, dude, I don't know you from a hole in the wall. I don't know what you would or wouldn't allow to be done. And this goes to the whole problem with this FISA laws and all this other stuff. The stuff that can just be done in secret. It's problematic. So yeah, I thought it was a big deal, and I thought she should come on to discuss what was going on at the very least. The little light that we can shine on it. To shine on it. Thanks all. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. And I am going to say subscribe. Thanks all.